Good morning, and thank you for coming. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll call the meeting to order. And call for motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of October 11th, 2023. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. And we'll call on Curtis for the executive director's report and remarks.
Terrific. Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, commissioners. Nice to see everyone this morning. Port employees, guests, let's see, contractors, friends, family, neighbors. Nice to see everyone this morning. I'd like to start, if I could, by acknowledging the Port safety champions on the board. You'll see there 4 Port employees, Ashesh, Susan, Daphne, and Rich. Just again, thank you to our Port employees who are in everything they do, working on keeping each other and our facilities safe. Just a great bunch there. Some really fascinating stories that came out in the packet. I urge you to check out. Ashesh is an interesting story about the marine side where a bunch of longshore out at T6, I believe, T5. It was a pesticide issue that really a bunch of people got sick on a vessel that arrived. It was because in its previous stop up in Tacoma, it had not been thoroughly cleaned, and a bunch of people getting sick, and Ashesh rightly identified the issue and alerted safety folks to come and get the whole thing worked out. Just some really interesting stories. So I really appreciate all 4 of those Port employees and what they do to watch out for safety. Could I have Donna Prigmore come and give the safety message today? Good morning, Donna.
My name is Donna Prigmore, and I'm the Senior Manager for Terminal and Landside Operations. I've been with the Port for 15 years, and I'm here today to talk about safety in my department as well as my personal safety philosophy. As background, terminal operations is comprised of 12 employees and includes responsibilities related to the functionality and cleanliness of our facility, operation of the common use ticket counters and boarding gates utilized by some of our airlines, the management of our many contract service providers such as foliage care and pest control, the operation of the Lost and Found office, and the PDX Volunteer Information Program, which includes approximately 120 volunteers who donate more than 13,800 hours annually to our passengers here at the airport. Additionally, our team manages the partnership with Relay Resources, who is contracted by the Port to provide janitorial services for PDX. Approximately 90 employees work on site. They are part of the Oregon Forward program, which supports meaningful work opportunities for Oregonians living with physical, mental, and developmental disabilities. We are proud to have Relay employees at PDX to help us directly enhance the passenger experience. Outside of the terminal, the landside operations team is comprised of 1 manager and 15 parking control representatives. They are responsible for safe and efficient traffic flow between P1 parking garage and the terminal facility, as well as traffic control along the curbside of the terminal itself. My department works closely with the safety team to keep our employees and passengers safe at PDX. As the senior leader for both terminal and landside operations, responsible for more than 225 people, including employees, contractors, and volunteers, I believe it is my responsibility to ensure everyone is aware that safety is a top priority for us all. To that end, we rely on 2 things in particular: committed and visible leadership, a belief that employee safety is paramount and a guiding principle at the Port. Second, engaged employee involvement, a belief that everyone is responsible for safety. My team and I recently worked with the safety department on several new processes and improvements within and outside of the terminal, including defining the protocols for identifying and handling illicit drugs after they were found at PDX, including ergonomic analysis of workstations in the Lost and Found office, addressing inadequate lighting levels and bag claim during construction, identifying high-risk conditions in front of escalators, and minimizing safety risks at the new children's play area on Concourse C. We are currently working with safety on ways to mitigate vehicle and pedestrian accidents on the roadway and improving informational signage. With the opening of the new ticket lobby and pre-security areas on May 22nd, 2024, much work remains. You have my commitment that as we prepare for the transition, which includes nearly doubling the size of the ticket lobby and pre-security spaces, we will remain laser focused on safety and will continue to emphasize how all of us bear the responsibility for identifying unsafe conditions, no matter how small or large. Right now, and over the next few months, my department will be working very closely with the operational readiness and testing team to ensure we do proper trials prior to May 22nd. These trials will continue until we are confident the operation is running smoothly up until opening day and beyond as needed. To date, not one person in my department has had a recordable OSHA injury or accident as far back as I can recall. That's a safety record we're proud of and one that I expect to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Really appreciate it. I didn't realize until I actually looked up that Daphne's actually here, one of our safety champions. Hi, Daphne. Thank you for watching out for safety. And I also note in our back row, flight attendant safety professionals who are thinking about traveler safety every day, and in particular in confined spaces where it can be very stressful. So thank you to all of you for watching out for safety as well. A few announcements on the transportation side of PDX Next. I think as many of you know, we had Congressman Peter DeFazio out here last month to celebrate his service to Oregon and to the country as chair of House Transportation Infrastructure, but also representing Oregon in Congress for 30 years. We dedicated the TriMet station here down outside Concourse B to Peter DeFazio in recognition of that service and really in recognition of public service. So it was really great to have him out here. Maybe just also in the section of transportation things happening out there, that line, the double tracking that's part of the Better Red program with TriMet is opening in February of 2024. And the pedestrian bike path next to the station is also opening next spring. So we're just really thrilled about that. In a little bit of other news, we also opened last month the new Uber Lyft taxi area in the ground floor of the parking garage 1, essentially giving folks access to those TNCs, transportation network companies. How am I doing, Dan? On that ground floor, it's operating really well. I was down there last week. It just looks great, and appreciate the team making that happen. The idea is to get more of those vehicles off the roadway so there's more regular flow for folks who are dropping off and picking up folks. Finally, the White House announced a couple weeks ago 2 tech hubs in Oregon receiving federal funding. The port played an advisory role in both the Corvallis Microfluidics Tech Hub and the Pacific Northwest Mass Timber Tech Hub, which we've talked about a lot here. Just really great news. That second one is led by the Oregon Mass Timber Coalition. Appreciate our team's engagement with Tallwood Design Institute there. Really excited about the opportunity there. And, you know, I'd say broadly, these tech hubs are a nice indication for us in Oregon that there's stuff happening, forward-looking opportunities around semiconductors and around mass timber that are really positive for job creation here. So with that, Madam President, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Curtis. We will ask any questions or comments here on the Executive Director's report. Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the report. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Move to the public comment period. As a reminder, we are obviously running this meeting under Oregon Public Meetings Law, and we'll have no deliberation on items that are not on our agenda, but welcome public comment at this time. We've received public comment, written comment from Dale Fake, Blaine Ackley, and Jim Lubisher. And I'll just call in the order that I have here. I think we'll begin with Mickey Barnes, who might be providing virtual comments. If you're, I think we see you, and maybe if you can test, we can maybe hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for hearing my comments. I will send a written copy after commenting this morning. I wish to express my thanks to David Breen and Rose Arzers from the Port Environmental Division for providing information on fuel sales at Port of Portland airports. Both have been very helpful in responding to my request. One of the documents included avgas fuel sales in relation to aircraft operations for 2012 to 2020. Additional information was provided for 2021 through 2023. The written comments will include graphs and excerpts from this data. The 2021 Reed Hillview Airport study on the impacts of piston engine aircraft emissions on the blood levels detected in children living near that airport used a formula to determine actual emissions. It involved multiplying the number of gallons of leaded fuel sold annually at the airport by 2.12, the amount of lead in a gallon of avgas, then converting to arrive at the number of pounds emitted by the aircraft using the airport. Based on the information provided, this approach reveals that aircraft fueling up at HIO released far more lead into the air between 2012 and 2020 than the Environmental Protection Agency accounted for, more than 13 tons in 8 years. An additional 1 to 2 tons have been released from 2021 to the present. These numbers suggest that if the port adheres to the 2030 unofficial goal set by Eagle before discontinuing the use of leaded fuel, another 5 to 7 tons will be released into the breathable air in Washington County, which is already the most lead polluted county in the entire state. Port's data shows that in 2012 and 2013, around 1.5 million gallons of avgas were sold at HIO each year. This means that well over 7 tons of lead were released in these 2 years alone. Though the operational count at HIO continued to increase between 2013 and 2014, port records show that leaded fuel sales suddenly and inexplicably decreased by more than 100,000 gallons, a 66% drop in annual avgas fuel sales. There were similar inconsistencies in the ensuing years. Since the port affixes a flowage fee to every gallon of avgas sold at HIO, accurate data on fuel sales should be available. Who can I speak with at the port to better understand the dramatic irregularities in the fuel flowage fee data provided? Some of the questions I would like to discuss. What formula does the port use to determine lead emissions? Has the formula changed? If so, how and when? What is the source of the data used for the formula and who provides it? What role does the port play, if any, in providing data or other inputs toward the EPA NEI figure? What role do FBOs play in providing this information? What mechanisms, if any, exist to validate the data? In closing, lead is a highly toxic substance that can adversely impact every system in the human body. For the health and well-being of this community, it is incumbent upon the port to provide accurate information about lead and other toxins released by their airports. It is also vitally important that the relentless poisoning and exploitation of this community by HIO users stop immediately. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. We look forward to receiving the written questions. I'll now call on Blaine Ackley. I hope I'm pronouncing appropriately.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, good. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. As you know, you should have in front of you some comments from me. And the first part of it just talks about if you have the knowledge and then you have the understanding, well, then that should lead to action. And Mickey has already so well described the knowledge base. And we have also added to the knowledge base just last month was the EPA finding that leaded avgas fuel is dangerous in any amount, and that regulation should proceed to protect the public health. And we know that as of yesterday, the Port of Portland still has not contacted the GAMI supplier, Mr. George Braley, about the availability of the only unleaded avgas fuel available that is certified by the FAA, but they haven't even contacted him. Now, think about for yourselves, if you want to go to a restaurant and you don't have reservations, and it's a popular restaurant, and I would bet this fuel but is going to become very popular very soon, that you may be out of luck, or you may be at the end of the line. Well, I suggest that if the port doesn't get on this, they are going to be out of luck and out of line, okay? And the only way for you commissioners who are actually the employer of all the people you hear today, including the executive director, need to tell them, get a hold of GAMI, find out where we are, what can we do to get in line? And then secondly, erect some lead poisoning signs around the perimeter of HIO so that people know that what is happening. And then make sure the storage tanks are ready for the GAMI, although it can be intermixed. I suggest we just make sure and cover all bases in advance. And then finally, we don't operate as human beings very well without having goals and directions. What's your goal? Set a goal. There are 3 airports in California that have already set 2025 as their goal for adoption of unleaded fuel, and 1 has already done so. 2 more are in line. Come on, we can do this. You can do this. We're Oregon. Come on. So just set a date, say 2025, and we would all be very pleased for you to do that. And I hope that you will take this advice in your council and think about it, and maybe have a meeting with the executive director and talk, how are we going to eliminate lead at Hillsborough as soon as possible? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jim Lubisher?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, President Kupro-Comas and Commission members. I'm Jim Lubisher from Hillsborough. Now, recently, State Senator Janine Solomon was given the port's informational sheet titled Frequently Asked Questions on Lead-Free Fuel regarding the port's transition from leaded aviation fuel. I have submitted my comments regarding that information sheet that you should have. But today, right now, I would like to highlight several items. As the port notes, there is currently an FAA-approved unleaded fuel developed by GAMI. And GAMI is now ramping up production for the West Coast. This fuel, as you've heard, has been approved by the FAA. It can use the present supply chain infrastructure. And as the port notes, it can be used safely in all piston engine aircraft. This fuel is currently being used at some airports in California. Cost is about $1 to $2 more per gallon, but that cost must be balanced against the hidden social costs of leaded fuel, which have been conservatively estimated to be at least $10 per gallon. And the reference to that is in my summation. Pilots do need to obtain an FAA STC certificate, but this is not a big deal and does have some expense, but that should not be stop them from getting it. The port asks, what is the Port of Portland doing to advocate for the transition? Now, in previously conversations with the port, Mr. Pippinger noted that the port cannot force the FBO that supplies the fuel to switch to an unleaded fuel. Now, in my submission, please note that the port can help the FBO switch to an unleaded fuel by providing a justification to the FAA to switch to an unleaded fuel. The link to this information and my source on that is in my submission. So the one step the port could do is prepare a justification to be presented to the FAA, a justification to switch from the unleaded fuel to an unleaded fuel, and that could be started immediately. Now, there's one new obstacle in this, is that there is an amendment in the House-approved FAA reauthorization bill, which is now before the Senate. Now, I am in the process of making Oregon senators aware of this obstacles. And if the port would like, I can, to support me in this effort, please let me know and I can send my letter to you and you can review it. And if you agree with it, you're certainly welcome to send it on to Senators White and Merkley. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have in the room Dale Fike or Fake. I'm sorry, please correct my pronunciation of your name.
I can't hear anybody now.
Thank you. We're moving on to the next public comment.
I have copies. Who distributes the copies?
Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Kupro Thomas. I see.
Just Alice is fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Dale Feek, and Fike's fine too. So, and Director and Commissioners. Just to start, I want to let you know that I have a pilot's license. I flew out of Hillsborough Airport to get that license. I actually started in Springfield, and I wrote a little paper called something like it's unsanitary thing to do, and it was a compliment to my flight instructor that was main instructor in Eugene. So I'm a pilot, but I don't have a current medical. It's quite a while ago. So I understand the joys of flying. I also have young children, grandchildren, that live between Ronler Acres and Hillsborough Airport, right between. And so they get toxic stuff from both places. And I'm very much concerned about their health based upon the emissions that go into the airport and Ronler Acres. In the email I sent you and what you had before you, I made public comment before the county commissioners, Catherine Harrington on Tuesday, Steve Calloway, the mayor of Hillsborough, yesterday evening, and I'm making a comment to you today, and I've sent in this, and I have a direct contact to the governor. So the governor will receive this. And the governor will appoint the next person. If there's a vacancy, she will appoint a member to this board because the governor appoints commissioners. So I'm asking you to please read what you have in front of you. It's called Hillsborough Airport Final. And so we request the Port of Portland provide currently FFA approved unleaded fuels from Swift Fuels as presented. We'll just skip that part because that's already been said. I'm chair of the Washington County Citizen Action Network. We have a paper here that you have now, and we wrote that in 2022, and that's what's been distributed to the people I just said have been distributed to. And we have asked. Mike Gallagher, he is a former retired Air Force pilot. He flew transport jets. He acted as the captain of the pilots who flew Intel jets out of California and out of Hillsborough airports. And he served on the board of the Port of Portland Hillsborough Airport Roundtable Exchange before the port disbanded that group, advisory group. And so since Mike is our spokesperson, I asked him to write something. He said, for years, efforts to bring an unleaded fuel to Hillsborough Airport have been met with one obstacle after another by the Port of Portland using various reasons, including agreements and policies created by the port which could be modified. The city of Hillsborough and Washington County have used the excuse that the operation of the airport is up to the FFA and the Port of Portland. While in many areas the interests of the city, the county, and port are aligned, in matters of public health, they are not. And the city and the county have a right and an obligation to weigh on issues such as lead and noise. What is truly ironic, says Mike Gallagher, about the port's obstructionist approach to lead issues is that an entire new technology is maturing at a rate few would have anticipated. Airports, airplanes is Mike's expertise. That's the reason he's the spokesman for Washington County Citizen Action Network. We are on the verge of eliminating petroleum-based fuel completely and replacing it with electric aircraft. While not a complete answer to the flight training operations in Hillsborough, ever more robust electric airplanes are coming to the commercial market. Once again, however, there does not appear to be any serious interest in the port, the city, or the county to make Hillsborough Airport, Hillsborough, a leader in this development. With the high-tech industry surrounding the Hillsborough Airport, it should be a source of embarrassment that we are not pushing ahead with the new technology that would eliminate virtually all emissions, including lead, and reduce airport noise. Mike says the citizens of Hillsborough and Washington County have a right to expect their elected officials to use all the tools. That's the governor, that's the county commissioners, that's the mayor of Hillsborough, and the county commissioner. Those are elected officials. You're appointed by the governor. Okay. So anyway, the citizens of Hillsborough and Washington County have every right to expect their elected officials to use all the tools they have to influence the port to become far more aggressive in this area. So that's my conclusion. Please take a look at the document that I have here, and it's supported by many neighborhood associations in Portland. And so we are very serious. We're going to put political pressure on whoever needs to have political pressure to get this done quickly. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peak, for your comment and the materials. As noted, this wasn't on the agenda, but if any commissioner has a clarifying question, either for port staff or for members of the public, this is an opportune time. Otherwise, we will move. We have one more person who has public comment. I believe is here in the room, and that's Crystal Berry.
Good morning. I would like to start by thanking the commissioners for this opportunity to address the commission on this very important topic. My name is Crystal Berry. I am the local vice president for Council 39, the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, and I am a 17-year flight attendant with Alaska Airlines. I have held a variety of positions within our union, but today I am here as the voice of our more than 750 Alaska Airline flight attendants that are based here at PDX. We are currently in contentious contract negotiations with Alaska Airlines. Our current collective bargaining agreement was bargained in 2014. Over the life of this 9-year agreement, we have extended the contract twice. The first was to help the company finalize its merger with Virgin America, and a second time to help the airline during the COVID pandemic. As workers, we have done our part to help our employer. We have extended this contract in the pursuit of being fairly respected and compensated when the time to bargain began. We have been thoroughly disappointed. Alaska repeatedly comes to the bargaining table with nothing prepared. We have filed for mediation in the hopes that maybe, just maybe, Alaska will be willing to fulfill its commitment to secure an industry-leading contract. The nearly 7,000 flight attendants are some of the very best in the aviation industry. We win awards time and time again for our service. We are reminded and thanked by upper-level management who appreciate us, but they are not willing to show us any true appreciation by working with our negotiating team to finalize a contract. Again, they show up to the table with literally nothing. or the proposals that they do bring will never satisfy our membership. We are asking for living wages, fairness in our scheduling, adequate rest to help us recuperate after days on the road, and the ability to plan our lives knowing the company can't just change our schedules on a whim. We need language in a contract that protects us. We are fighting for things that should be awarded without this massive contract battle, yet here we are. Where we are is a place that requires solidarity amongst us as workers and our work group. Our flight attendants are tired of Alaska's delay tactics. That is why we have asked for your support to put pressure on the company. We need to show our company that we stand together and in support of our negotiating team. We need our passengers and the flying public to understand what Alaska Airlines is doing or not doing in terms of negotiating with our flight attendants. With 755 flight attendants based out of PDX, the vast majority of our community personally knows Alaska Airlines flight attendants. We are your neighbors, the members of your PTAs, we are sports coaches, but most recently, we are also your servers, dog walkers, and baristas. Many of us have to have second jobs to make enough money to live and pay rent. We are renting spare bedrooms in our homes to cover mortgage payments. We need to be able to stand up and make our voices heard. And where do we do that? It's here at PDX. Our first major action was on August 15th. We put out a call to action and hundreds of PDX flight attendants responded that they wanted to participate in informational picketing. What that means is they had to bid for the day off. Many adjusted their entire schedules to have this small opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder with their fellow flight attendants and coworkers. System-wide across our 5 other bases, which include Anchorage, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego, we had over 2,000 participants, except here at PDX. It is not shoulder to shoulder. This commission has limited us to only 30 people. That is less than 4% of our workforce. 30 people standing on our picket line. They're spaced so far apart within the free speech area that we have to try to make the optics look as though we fill the space. It makes us look like a few disgruntled employees, not the hundreds here at PDX who are frustrated with Alaska. You are denying the power to the people. The space that it is allotted to us could easily fit all 200 of the flight attendants who want to participate as one. The restrictions on the number of people who can picket is way more restrictive than what AFA sees at other airports around the country. Many do not have restrictions at all, and where they do, the restrictions are far higher. For example, at LAX, we routinely have pickets with well over 100 flight attendants. During the event on August 15th, LAX had over 400 participants on their picket line. In LAX, they marched, they chanted, they even had a band. Speaking of the allotted free speech location, it is on the outside curb. This curb has minimal opportunity to educate the flying public about the shameful way Alaska has been dealing with its passenger-facing workers. Even worse, this free speech location is in front of Delta, United, and Southwest ticket counters. These passengers, these aren't the passengers we are trying to connect with, and these aren't the airlines we have a message for. We want to address Alaska Airlines directly, yet we are so far away from the ticket counter as possible. Why can the free speech location not pivot and move based on the PDX workers that are exercising their right to free speech? We need to be in front of Alaska ticket counters to have any impact. We need to be curbside on the departure level for travelers, not the outside curb where hotel vans only. This is our place of work. Hundreds of flight attendants and other crews show up here to work. What we are saying is that we are not able to voice our concerns to the employer at our place of employment. This is unacceptable. Our voices are also being silenced with the port rules that restrict chanting. These restrictions are unreasonable and not in line with what our union sees across the country. This is the only airport we are aware of which prohibits any chanting or verbal expression of support. Chanting is an integral part of how we interact with the traveling public, our passengers, and gives us an opportunity to make Alaska hear us. Our chants are directed at Alaska directly, but what impact can we have when we are completely silenced or at a minimum put under restriction of how long we can chant and the frequency? The ability to picket and make our voices heard is an integral part of our labor rights under the Railway Labor Act. By having this restriction not common at other airports, you are taking away our voice. Our voice deserves to be heard. Every flight attendant and every worker at PDX has the right to peacefully protest and picket. When pressure is put on management, change can happen. What we want is a contract. When Alaska decides to start bargaining in good faith, we won't need to be at the airports across our system. We won't need to be picketing at PDX. But that day has not come. It is imperative that we have less restrictions within the free speech permit. We should be able to picket our employer directly right in front of Alaska Airlines. We should be able to chant and use our voices to make sure we are heard. Any regulations must balance the labor and free speech rights of workers with the safety and security of the airport. We are the Union of In-Flight Safety Professionals, and we can work with you to find a proper balance. I ask you to reconsider your decision and make an exception for airline workers. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much for coming to speak with us. As I noted, because this isn't on our agenda, we don't have ability to deliberate on it today, but I'm going to ask that we put it on the agenda for next month so that we have an opportunity to speak about what the restrictions might be and how we can change them. And I'll also ask Dan Pippinger to continue to work to see what we can do to facilitate this issue in the meantime. Any questions from the commission? Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Commissioner Nemi.
I hear that we are being asked to not deliberate about it. I just want to say thank you so much for coming to testify. And I also just appreciating the work of flight attendants through the pandemic and have noted that, you know, airlines like Alaska were bailed out significantly during the pandemic. And one of the things that we were reported on with the port's economic impact statement last month was actually the decline of the cost of living standards for flight attendants in today's economy, you know, as those costs have increased. And so, you know, as a port commissioner, I really appreciate the work that you have done, that you all showed up during very dangerous times to be there for our flying community. And I look forward to this discussion next month.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our first general discussion item, and I'll call on Antoinette Chandler, who will introduce it.
Good morning, Madam President, and good morning, commissioners. Each year, you know, the port is required to perform audits on our books and records, and we're here today to present those results to you for fiscal 23. I'm joined here by Bob Burkett, our controller, and Ashley Austin, who is our audit partner from Moss Adams. Bob's going to start the presentation by reviewing our financial results from 23, and then Moss Adams will present the audit results and some required communications. And we're just entering into the beginning of a 5-year contract with Moss Adams, and I just want to point out a couple of things. One, just the professionalism that they bring to this process and their commitment to this organization. I want to thank Ashley and her team immensely for that. And I also just want to acknowledge, last year we introduced the idea of bringing in a minority CPA firm to have an opportunity to partner with Ashley and Moss Adams, and they have continued that commitment over this same 5-year period to work with the minority-owned firm Simpson & Simpson. So when we talk about alignment around our commitment and values to share prosperity, we just really appreciate that our external partners are stepping up and stepping into that. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn this over to Bob and let them get started.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. That picture makes me laugh. Good morning. We're here today to present to you the port's annual audit reports, of which there are 3 that you should have received in advance of the meeting. We'll also give you a brief overview of our fiscal 2023 results and our external auditor we don't have two today, will present to you their reports and required communications for the audits they performed. We'll start with a brief review of our audit reports, and then I'll hand the presentation over to Moss Adams. Next slide, please. So starting with financial results, we have income statement data for PDX comparing revenues and expenses for the fiscal years ending June 30, 2023 to 2022. You can see on the first line, operating revenues increased by over $25 million compared to fiscal 22, really due to the impact of higher passenger counts on all of our passenger dependent revenue streams. We ended the year with passengers up about 10.8%, so about 15.6 million passengers in fiscal 2023 versus 14.1 in 2022. Operating expenses, excluding depreciation and amortization, are also up about $19 million year over year. Apologize, it sounds like this microphone's cutting in and out. The expenses were up also primarily due to higher operating costs associated with a higher number of passengers moving through the airport. Down on depreciation and amortization expense, we're up about $6 million in fiscal 23. As we continue work on the T-Core family of projects, we've had a few assets come online and begin depreciating. We'll see a really significant increase in this line in 2024 when the westward expansion comes online. On the non-operating income line, you can see we're down almost $5 million year over year. It's due to a number of different factors. We received about $13 million less in COVID relief funding during fiscal 2023. That was offset in part due to higher CFC and PFC revenues as a result of higher passenger counts. Interest revenue is also up in 23 due to higher interest rates and higher cash balances. And we also have higher interest expense during fiscal 2023 as a result of new debt service coming online during the year. So the bottom line here is a slight decrease in net income year over year to $36.6 million in fiscal 2023. That's really attributable to less federal pandemic funding and stronger operating results. So not a bad story. Next. So this table adds assets, liabilities, and net position off of our balance sheet. Net position is simply the mathematical difference between assets and liabilities. Sometimes you hear it called net position or equity in other, or net worth or equity in other forums. In governmental forum, it's net position. So assets and liabilities both increased significantly during the year. Largely due to capital spending, as well as the issuance of debt to pay for that capital spending. Those are the main drivers. So our net position increased by $29.3 million during the year. Next. And here we have unrestricted cash and investments for PDX. Unrestricted cash and investments are available for any lawful airport purpose, and they are up $43.4 million at the end of fiscal 2023. That is largely due to the net income amount that you see up a few lines above. So for more information on our fiscal 2023 performance, I'd point you to the management's discussion and analysis starting on page 3 of the audit reports. It's about 6 pages of tables and discussions that really explains more of the details behind our fiscal 2023 results. Next, please. So now we move on to some high-level income statement data for the general fund. And you'll note the general fund is referenced as marine and other in the reports that we've given you. Starting with operating revenues on the first line, our operating revenues decreased by over $16 million in fiscal 2023, primarily as a result of lower land sales, as well as the loss of revenues associated with the rail shuttle service at T6, offset in part by higher revenues from the navigation division's dredging operation. Fiscal 23 operating expenses, excluding depreciation and amortization, are up about $7.7 million year over year. This was due to higher longshore labor expenses associated with higher container throughput at T6, higher costs for increased dredging activity associated with those higher revenues, as well as increased salaries expense across the general fund as a whole. Down on depreciation and amortization expense, we're up about $3 million. That is primarily due to the implementation of new accounting guidance in GASB 96. It requires us to begin amortizing software as a service cost or cloud software costs. So that led to that increase. And then non-operating income, we're down over $19 million year over year, largely because in fiscal 22, we received one-time environmental insurance buyout settlements that weren't repeated in 23. That was offset in part in 23 by higher interest income as a result of higher interest rates. So the net result of all of these items is a positive net income for the general fund of $4.4 million in fiscal 23. Next. So here we have our balance sheet data for the general fund, and you can see that total assets for the general fund are down $34.5 million. Total liabilities are down $51 million. So that leads to a net increase in net position of $16.5 million for the year. That's largely due to the net income as well as capital contributions or grant funding and transfers from PDX to pay for general aviation capital. Next. And so now we have unrestricted cash and investments for the general fund. You can see our balance increased just over $13 million year over year. Again, this is the result of positive net income, capital grants, and transfers from PDX. Next. So now we'll move on to a quick overview of the report on federal awards. This slide recaps some of the information in the report regarding expenditures of federal awards. You can see on the first line that our total expenditures of federal awards decreased year over year in 2023. The three lines under the heading details of larger federal awards show the primary areas where the port receives federal funding and how much was received under each of these programs. So the FAA Airport Improvement Program funds airport capital improvements. We incurred about $1 million more in grant eligible capital spending during fiscal 2023. Year over year fluctuations on this line are largely a function of the projects that we're undertaking in a given year and their eligibility for capital funding or federal funding, excuse me. And then during the pandemic, the port was awarded funding under CARES, CARISA, and the ARPA acts. And in fiscal 23, as our employments recovered and increased further, the amount of money that we drew, $11.9 million, was a significant decrease versus fiscal 2022. Nearly all of that was for PDX. And this last line, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers dredging, that's related to our reimbursable contract for maintenance dredging of the Columbia River. While not a grant, it's technically considered a federal award for purposes of this report. The level of maintenance dredging that we perform in a given year is really driven by the Corps of Engineers and is dependent on the amount of federal funding that they receive. Next. And the last report we've given you is the report on passenger facility charges, which we typically refer to as PFCs. PFCs are that $4.50 per ticket charge on in-plane passengers that is collected by the airlines and remitted to the airport to be spent on FAA-approved projects. The PFC report starts with much of the same information as you see in the audit report, but starting on page 45, information specific to the FAA's PFC program is included, as is Moss Adams reports on compliance and internal control over compliance of the FAA's PFC program. So unlike accrual basis PFC revenues that you see in our audited financial statements, the collections data here is required by the FAA to be presented on a cash basis. So while our financials show a healthy increase year over year of just over $3 million in PFC revenue, the collections data here actually shows a decline. That's simply due to timing of when we actually received those cash payments under a cash basis of accounting. In fiscal 22, we actually received 13 months worth of payments from 4 of our 5 largest carriers. So then in 23, we received 11 months. Really, the bottom line is the amount of money that we are receiving for PFC collections tracks well with enplanements, and it's up overall. The small amount of interest on the second line there that we earn on our PFC balances is really an increase due to increased interest rates. And our PFC expenditures are pretty flat year over year because in both years we really only used PFCs to pay debt service, which is relatively flat. Next. So that wraps up what I have on the audit reports. So before I pass the torch, I'll ask if there are any questions.
Thank you. I know how much work goes into preparing these, so yeah, thank you. Just a couple of questions. One relates to the environmental liability accrual, and if you could just, I know that you have to have reasonable expectation to incur that liability, but if you could just talk to me about scope and scale and on a percent, how might we look at this from a trend perspective? That's question number one.
Okay.
And question number two is that at least year over year, the pension liability grew substantially. So I'm just curious, is that sort of a one-line trend, or is that, that sizable increase expected as we look forward?
Yep. So environmental liabilities, we have to follow GASB 49 pollution remediation obligations. And really what we have on the books is primarily for remedial investigation and feasibility studies. We do not have a significant liability accrued for actual cleanup. We do have some, but we only can, or we're only required and we're only allowed to accrue up through what is estimable at certain stages when there have been obligating events. So very little cleanup costs are actually in there. It's mostly going to be studies and design work. And then on the pension liabilities, pension rates are set every 2 years by actuarial valuation at PERS. So every 2 years, you will see potentially the more significant change on the books. I would expect, given where returns have been, they were below the assumed rate of return last year. And while we're not through this year yet, they have not been trending as high as we would like. I would expect that we'll see another increase in the ports portion of the pension liability. I don't think it's going to be tremendous, but I do believe it will go up, and we'll probably see a little upward pressure on our rates. We do have side accounts with the state that help to offset that and help protect us somewhat, but they are also subject to interest rates as well. So when they earn below the assumed rate of return, that decreases the amount that we have available for offset.
Any other questions on this part? Okay, go ahead.
All
Ashley.
right. Well, as you know, Moss Adams is our independent audit firm. They conducted their required annual audits of the port's financial records. Pleased to say that they were the successful proposer for a new 5-year contract. So this is the first year of that contract. With us today to present their report is Ashley Austin, the engagement partner. So it's all yours.
Thank you, Bob. Can you hear me? Okay, well, good morning. Thank you again for having me. I'm here to give a little of the results for the audit for 2023. So next slide, please. And on to the next slide. We have a lot of filler in this presentation, unfortunately. So next slide. Quick agenda. I'll go through the auditor opinions and reports, overview of the areas where we spent the most time during our audit process, the required communications with those charged with governance, which is this group, and then just a quick couple of other slides of other information. Next slide. And then you can go on to the next slide again. So we did issue an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. So that large book in front of you, we said that those are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, which is the highest level of assurance that you can receive. It's a clean opinion. It's what you want to hear as commissioners. Go on to the next slide. We also issue a separate report on Oregon minimum standards because you're an Oregon municipal corporation. We have to look at things like how you adopt your budget, your procurement processes, making sure that you're in line with all of those required rules and regulations of Oregon revised statutes. We also look at a variety of other things, if your investments are in line with those policies and statutes, et cetera. No control findings and no compliance findings were included in that report, so also a clean opinion. Next slide. These relate to your federal funds audit or the single audit. So the first bucket on that slide is really related to internal control over financial reporting and compliance. Because we conduct our audit in accordance with government auditing standards, and in addition to generally accepted auditing standards, we're required to issue this separate report. And it would include if we had any financial reporting findings related to your internal controls or any compliance findings with laws and regulations. None of either of those occurred, none of which are included in the reports, so clean opinion there. The second report that's listed on this slide is related to the bucket of funding that we focused on and tested as part of our single audit, which was the dredge contract with the Corps of Engineers. We look at various material compliance requirements that are direct material to the award, things like allowable costs, procurement again, cash management, those types of things. Materiality is very low for this type of testing. If we have any sort of issues over 50 cents, we have to look into them. So no deficiencies identified and no compliance findings is actually very good news. And because it's under such scrutiny by us as auditors, that's telling you that you have good controls in place over your federal awards. Next slide, please. The final one I think is related to, next slide, the PFC awards. Maybe. You go to the next slide. There it is. So again, we issue the same report on internal control or financial reporting. Again, no compliance findings, no financial reporting findings included in that report. And then we also report on compliance with the requirements applicable to the passenger facility charge program, no internal control findings and no compliance findings. So it took me all of 3 minutes to tell you all of the results, but it takes management all year to really get these results. So big kudos to management. It takes a lot of hard work to receive these types of results. So kudos to management again. Next slide, please. So a few just areas of audit emphasis. Go on to the next slide, please. So we do look at your internal control environment. It's a large part of our audit process. We don't opine on those internal controls, but we do look at them as a basis for designing the rest of our audit procedures. So the items that are listed in that bullet point, revenue, leases, capital assets, cash management, payroll, environmental liability, we're looking at the controls that management has in place that are key, that if they failed, then there would be potentially a material error. Happy to report that there were no, material errors that resulted, no issues with internal controls. We relied on your internal controls as part of our audit process. We also looked at management estimates because they have significant areas for bias. The environmental remediation liability is a huge estimate in your financial statements and significant. As part of our audit process, we spend a lot of time with the port's environmental legal team. We talk to management. We spend time looking at the estimates, making sure that they're supported and reasonable. We also do a lot with the legal contingencies to make sure that anything that is outstanding that may need to be recorded in your financial statements is recorded. We confirm with all attorneys that you use during the year and receive a letter from your general counsel. We look at depreciation, huge estimate, lives that you assign to all of your capital assets, as well as the allowance for doubtful accounts, and that discount rate that's used for the port's lease receivable, because as of 2022, when that came online, 2021, it's a large receivable that's recorded on your books and discounted using a rate that's assigned by management. So also another area of management estimate. Net pension liability, obviously that's another significant liability sitting on your financial statements, and we do look at that obligation. We look at all the reports that are received from Oregon PERS. Management also puts together a report or a schedule that we tie out to that information that we receive from Oregon PERS. We look at the deferred inflows and outflows, making sure that they're reasonable. And we also test some of that information that goes from the port to PERS to be sure that it's correct, looking at new hires and contributions that were made during the year by the port. You did have some bond activity this year, so we looked at that issuance of the Series 29 bonds, making sure that those were accounted for accurately and correctly, disclosed appropriately, looked at discounts and premiums, amortization, any debt repayments. We confirm a lot of that debt during the year. We also evaluated the port's termination of the swap instruments this year. Capital assets, obviously you have a lot going on here at the airport, so we tested a lot of additions, retirements, depreciation expense, all looked reasonable. And then finally, revenue recognition. We look at a lot of those operating revenues using business indicators, employments, deplayments, et cetera. Confirmed property tax revenue, looked at investment income, PFC, CFC, we also confirm, and then federal grants, and then considered the collectability of receivables. If you go to the next slide. Obviously, as I mentioned, leases came online in fiscal year 2022, but restated for fiscal year 21 as well. That continues to be a significant amount on your financial statements. So we spend quite a bit of time just looking to see if there were any new leases during the year, any modifications or terminations of leases that happen, and making sure that they're appropriately accounted for. Looking at things that weren't included in the lease receivable, that's our biggest risk as auditors, is the completeness of that lease receivable. So looking to make sure that anything that was excluded was appropriately excluded. And then we also looked at the port's lease liability and right to use asset, although that's immaterial to the financial statements as a whole. Bob already mentioned the port did adopt GASB 96, which was subscription-based information technology arrangements, or SPIDAs. That's really taking any sort of software that you pay, that you have agreed to pay for more than 1 year, and placing that on your balance sheet as a right to use subscription-based asset and then a corresponding liability. That resulted in about $3 million total being recorded on your financial statements. So not super significant, but we did evaluate that as part of the audit process this year. Net position, we're really concerned with the classification of unrestricted, restricted, and that net investment in capital assets. So we're recalculating those, making sure it's accurate. We also have an IT team led by Leela Annan. She's a senior manager. She comes in and talks to your IT folks, performs tests over change management, security and access of your systems, as well as operations, and provides a debrief memo as part of her process. No significant issues were identified as a part of her review. I already mentioned that we performed the single audit focused on the contract dredging award totaling $25 million. And then we always perform an unpredictable procedure. It's part of us trying to keep management on their toes so that we don't ask for the same thing every single year. This year we looked at repairs and maintenance just to confirm that amounts were properly expensed. Next slide. So I'm going to launch into the required communications with those charged with governance. So our responsibility under our professional standards and government auditing standards is really just to express our opinion. So the only thing that Moss Adams owns in those books in front of you is the opinion. Our audit doesn't relieve you or management of your responsibilities. We do perform our audit in accordance with our professional standards, and it's really to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance. So we're not auditing every single dollar, nor every single transaction. We do consider internal control, as I mentioned already, but we don't opine on internal control. And then we communicate findings that in our judgment are relevant to your responsibilities. This is like the caveat slide, right? So we'll move on. Next slide, please. Plan, scope, and timing. So we did meet with the commission officers in the audit entrance meeting in May. This would be my opportunity to let you know if there were any changes to our plan, scope, and timing. There were no changes. We executed the audit in the same time frame that we originally agreed to, and we issued the financial statements on time. Next slide, please. So significant accounting policies and unusual transactions, management does have the responsibility for selecting the accounting policies. Those are listed in footnote 1 of the financial statements. If you don't read any other footnotes, that's a really good one to read, because that's how management accounts for significant accounting transactions throughout the year. Of course, during our audit process, we review any changes that happened during the year. There were no changes except for that adoption of GASB 96, as I already mentioned, and we did pay attention to the adoption of that and reviewed the changes that they made to the financial statements as a result. No other significant accounting policy changes occurred during the year, and we believe that management has selected and applied those significant accounting policies appropriately and consistently with that of last year. Next slide. As you know, management does have quite a few estimates and judgments in the financial statements, so we spend quite a bit of time looking at those, a little bit more rigor. I already talked about the environmental remediation liability, legal contingencies, the discount rate, those types of things. We looked at those, deemed them all to be reasonable, didn't have any adjustments as a result. Next slide. As I mentioned, the disclosures in the financial statements we do review as part of our audit process. They're clear and consistent based on our review of those disclosures. We do draw your attention to specific disclosures if you're not going to read all of the financial statement disclosures, knowing that the financial statements are large. Note 1, I already mentioned that summary of significant accounting policies. Note 6, because it's a significant amount on your financial statements, leases about $400 million. Long-term debt, also a large number. Pension plans and deferred compensation plan, because that's a large liability. And then commitments and contingencies note discloses the information about your environmental remediation liability and any legal contingencies or other commitments that are included in your financial statements. Next slide. This would be my opportunity to let you know if there were any difficulties encountered in performing the audit, if we had difficulty receiving information or getting access to individuals that we wanted to talk to. None of that happened this year. Next slide. As part of our audit process, we are required to communicate if we identify any adjusting or unadjusted journal entries. So there were no adjusting journal entries, and there are 2 types of adjusting journal entries, just as a reminder. Management provides us with a trial balance. We audit that trial balance. If we identify an adjusting journal entry that is above our materiality threshold, that we would require management to post that in order to receive a clean opinion. There were none of those this year. There can also be adjusting journal entries that we identify that management is like, yeah, let's post that, but there were none of those either. The only adjustment that was identified is a proposed adjustment. So we propose it because it's above our findings threshold, but it's not material to the financial statements overall. And management says, that's a difference in methodology, or it's not material to the financial statements, or both. And we will not elect to post that adjustment. That happened this year. And if you've been on the commission for a while, you've heard me talk about this before. This is a proposed adjustment related to a difference in methodologies around the tracts of land that you own and are held for sale, the properties held for sale in the general fund, marine and other. You did have a sale this year of land. We calculated a little tiny difference. So that's why you see that we calculated a decrease of cost of property sold by $260,000. But overall, it's pretty immaterial, but it's above our threshold. So have to communicate it here today. It will resolve upon the final sale of those tracts of land. So that's good news. Next slide. You already know that the port is subject to legal proceedings. Those are disclosed in the financial statements. And we also spend a lot of time confirming with attorneys that are used, and then also Dan as the general counsel. Next slide. Pleased to report that there were no disagreements. This would be about an accounting or auditing matter that came up during the audit process. None of those happened this year. Management is great to work with as always. Go to the next slide, please. Also, we would be required to communicate if there were any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in non-compliance, but pleased to report that there are none of either this year. Next slide. This slide really gets at if management elected to go out and ask another auditor or CPA firm for a different opinion shopping about an accounting or auditing matter, that CPA would be required to contact us. We'd be required to tell you, make sure that they had all the facts and circumstances, but there were no such consultations that happened this year. Next slide. So other than the contract that we executed this year, we do 2 agreed upon procedures, engagements, and those have engagement letters, and the management representation letters, which we ask management to sign saying that they've told us everything that they are required to tell us, that they've provided us everything, both for the financial statements and the PFC. No other significant communications, and you are privy to ask for those types of communications if you so desire. Next slide. No matters of going concern came to our attention, and we would obviously talk to you about that before now if there were, but none came to our attention during the audit this year. Go to the next slide. And no instances of fraud or non-compliance with laws and regulations. I think that concludes. If you go to the next slide, just a quick slide on an accounting update. There are 3 accounting standards that are coming up GASB 99, which is not expected to have a significant impact. GASB 100, which is around accounting changes, error corrections of your financial statements, also not expected to have a significant impact. And then GASB 101, compensated absences, which is effective for the port's 2025 fiscal year. I don't think that's going to have a significant impact to the financial statements overall either, because you operate on an accrual basis and in an enterprise fund, so not significant of an impact. Contact information, my information is on the left-hand side there. I had 2 managers assisting me with the audit this year, Scott Boemke and Brittany Davis. If you had questions for them, you could feel free to reach out, but please use me as much as you like. I'm happy to answer any of your questions, so I'll open it up for questions now.
First, thank you to you and to the internal team for this. I know it is a ton of work, and we really appreciate the results, particularly when they look like this. Commissioner Alexander.
Yes, let me offer my thanks as well. This is always very illuminating when we go through this process, and I appreciate the detail. I also have been just drawn to the use of language, and you use significant around a couple of characterizations. One that had to do with consultation of other accounting firms, and the other that had to do with the difficulty of the audit. I lifted significant out of the response, which would be nothing to worry about. But when I see significant, and because you've heightened me to the use of language, is it that the times that we're in sort of had this process be challenged, COVID and some of the other impacts, or was there something that didn't come to that level but existed nonetheless? I hope my question is clear.
Yeah, I'm going to try to answer it. Our professional standards that we operate under as auditors really heightens significant as a key word that we utilize. But there was nothing that we identified that was under the significant threshold, but we are required to communicate if it was a significant deficiency, or if there was, I don't remember saying significant in the accounting consultations with other auditors, but if there was any sort of consultation, we would be required to tell you about that. But a significant deficiency is is what I remember saying in terms of this presentation, and that's where we would be required to communicate those items to you. And there can be things that are under that threshold that are management letter best practice items that aren't necessary to be communicated to this group in this public forum. But we did have a few recommendations of just minor items along the way, but we don't include those in this presentation. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Just again, I think the use of language here is very specific, and so I didn't want to look past that.
Commissioner Luther and then Commissioner Sunput. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. Actually, it's a little bit related on the other than significant deficiencies. I was wondering if there were any themes or aggregate of things that didn't quite rise to the significant deficiency level that are worth just mentioning. I would say in areas of focus for management that were in the recommendation letter. And the other is just informationally, what is the materiality standard that you use in looking at the level of things that you are bringing to the attention of the commission? Thank you.
I'll answer your second one first. Materiality is set using quantitative and qualitative factors. So we look at total assets, total liabilities, total net position, total revenues, and we use a percentage, typically 1 to 5% of those items. And then that's our overall materiality threshold. And then we drive that down pretty far for our testing specifically. And then our findings threshold is about 5% of our overall materiality threshold. So that threshold is that threshold at which we are required to communicate items to you as a commission. In terms of best practice recommendations, no significant items that I can recall off the top of my head. I do remember that we did have some additional discussion around the IT security and access change management type items, but nothing that was significant that management wasn't doing properly, just things that they could better their documentation around in terms of the various systems that they utilize. Is that accurate? Would you say that's accurate? So I think no significant themes, some sign-offs that maybe didn't occur, which we don't necessarily think is important for you all to hear about, but nothing. Management does a really nice job. So I would say there were no significant themes that arose throughout the audit.
First, thank you both to the external team and the internal team for all the hard work and the good results. So this is a question on the IT audit, and probably there is IT equipment that is operational today. There's IT equipment that is landing, so to speak, especially as part of PDX Next. As you look at the audit, do you look at new things that are coming in, because those are the points of greatest vulnerability?
As part of our audit process, we look at the IT systems that are really in place for financial close and reporting. So JD Edwards specifically, we're looking at the IT systems that are specific to get those financial statements brought together to make sure that change anything in the background, that no one has access to that system that shouldn't have access, that anything that goes through a change, or if there's something that needs to be changed or a report that someone can get, that those are going through the appropriate systems. We don't look at anything that doesn't relate to financial reporting.
Okay, so if we were to think of risk assessment outside of JD Edwards and the financial systems, we should be thinking about it in a separate bucket.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Koba.
Thank you. On that line, Bob, I think we talked about IT security risk maybe somewhere along the line in the last year. I can't remember, but certainly, and especially with the new airport coming on, is it worth thinking about some kind of IT security assessment? Or I'm not an expert in this.
We actually have a department that does that, and they are actively engaged on the TCOR team, as well as corporate IT, keeping an eye on that. These new systems over in the terminal really aren't going to impact our financial systems, but it's all connected on networks. And if somebody can get in one spot and crawl their way through and get to financial systems, you could have a problem. So we're definitely alert for those kinds of issues. And we've got lots of firewalls and segregation and separate networks.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for motion and second for approval of the recommendation.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you again for all the work. I'll call on Dan Pippinger to introduce the next agenda item. I'm sorry. Am I out of order? Okay, thank you, Myra, please. Apologies. Sorry.
Hello. Okay.
I went from.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Mayra Arreola, and I'm the Chief Share Prosperity Officer with the Port of Portland. And I'm excited to be with you today to present some of the findings of the Share Prosperity Report, along with some of my colleagues. This report is a really important milestone for the Port of Portland. It's the culmination of a 5-year commitment that the organization, committed to in 2018, and it really highlights both the accomplishments of the last fiscal year and the aggregate of the 5 years in total. And so this is exciting for us, and it really, from my perspective, really shows that this is a long journey the port has been in for a while, and that there's been a lot of progress and a lot of learnings that really has positioned us to be where we are, and then take all these learnings and all these accomplishments to develop new strategies in ways that are really aligned with where the organization is right now and the current mission. So next slide, please. I'm just going to give a quick refresher on the 3 goals that were outlined as part of the report, and then my colleagues will go in more depth on each one. So primarily, we have goal 1, which is to increase small business participation. This goal really focused on advocating for small businesses, community investments to support small business development, and then to improve existing processes so there were more transparency and access for small business owners. Next slide. Goal 2, as you can see, is to create an inclusive and welcoming place to work. This goal in particular focused on staff inclusion and engagement opportunities, developing and delivering training for professional development, and also to build an environment where employees felt welcome, safe, and included. And next slide. And the last goal that is highlighted in this plan has to or relates to increasing equitable community engagement. So this really focuses on creating a pathway to have constant engagement with community, regardless of us having a request for information or partnership, just to being in relationship and bringing that wisdom into our practices. To also create educational partnerships and provide financial support to different organizations through sponsorships, and creating a pathway to enhance just overall economic well-being of the communities that we're centering through our mission. Like I mentioned, this is a culmination of the 5 years, and we're excited to be here with you today. And right now I'm going to ask for my colleagues, Daphne Patrick, who's a Small Business Compliance Specialist, Heather Chow, the Human Resource Director, and Elizabeth Kennedy Wong, our Community Engagement and Tribal Relations Program Manager, to come and share with you in more detail information on the 3 goals. And then I'll come back and close the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Not yet? Okay. My name is Daphne Patrick, and I'm going to talk to you about our Goal 1 small business participation. Next slide, please. For Goal 1, our look back on the last 5 years will include how the port has done on some of our major construction projects for PDX Next. Projects included the Quick Turnaround Facility, the QTA, the Terminal Balancing Concourse E extension, the Packer RCC, and also the Concourse B renovation. As you can see, each project completed were vastly different from their scope of work to their small business participation, but overall the port achieved 99.25 in small business participation for the work on these PDX Next projects. Next slide. As we move to our overall spends for projects started in the last 5 years, our efforts have resulted in approximately 15% small business participation. To put it in actual dollars, that's approximately $248 million to minority women and small business owners. This number does include the main TCOR project renovation that is currently in construction. The effects of the pandemic caused many issues with attaining participation in small businesses. Many small businesses couldn't keep their doors open, but if they could, they combated a shrinking workforce, inflation, cash flow issues, not to mention global supply chain issues. Next slide. While we didn't reach our goal of 20% small business spend for our locally funded projects, we did exceed our 11% goal on our federally funded projects with an overall average of 21% DBE spend. Next slide. In 2022, our main terminal project established a technical assistance program an amount of $750,000. Of that $750,000, $150,000 was awarded to a pre-apprenticeship training aimed at increasing diversity in trades. The balance is targeted for small businesses to assist them in providing software, hardware, accounting, estimating, anything that's important in elements of executing their work on TCOR. Recently, it was announced that the TCOR project would be moving to helmets instead of hard hats. For small businesses and employees, going from a $30 cost to potentially $100 to $200 cost per employee is a really big hit for our small business owners. So the port is going to be using some of those technical assistance funds to purchase the helmets for the employees of the small businesses on the TCOR project. So far, we have given out approximately 100 helmets, and we are hoping to give out approximately, at least several hundred more in the upcoming month before the deadline of the end of the year. Next slide. Our Mentor Protege program started in 1995 in response to the lack of minority women and small business firms participating on our projects. Small businesses are paired with 2 mentors who provide business advice and guidance through a 3-year series of facilitated meetings. In June of 2023, the port graduated another 11 more protege firms, which totals 143 firms that have graduated since the inception of the program. This equated to about 47 firms that have been awarded 300 contracts at the Port of Portland. It's about $117 million in awards. Irene Appel is the main coordinator managing this program and has just started a new cohort with 18 more proteges for the next 3 years. Next slide. PDX's new main terminal project will include 21 new concession spaces, both pre and post security. Build-out costs are generally the largest barrier to entry for concessionaires at PDX. To reduce this barrier for small businesses, we've evaluated business terms, provided a build-out credit, and will install exhaust infrastructure of food and beverage locations. The work that our tenants and concessions team and the intentionality around our shared prosperity goals has led to reporting approximately 20.5% in small business participation. Next slide. For our workforce and apprenticeship program, the Port's Workforce and Apprenticeship Program allows us to help and increase participation of apprentices, to increase women and minorities in trades, which in another way our shared prosperity show up in the work we do. Our overall goal is 15%, and as you can see, we have achieved 19.47 for our overall apprenticeship rate. Our minority and journeymen and apprentices is about 19.75%, and our overall female worker rate for journeymen and apprentices is about 8.62. Next slide. Last but not least is our Goal 1 achievements is our business development. Our Breakside partnership with the Rockwood Market Hall and the Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center provides critical pathways opportunities for students building their career in the food industry. POIC and the Rosemary Anderson High School graduated their first cohort on April 26, 2023. Scholarships will fund 10 to 15 students over the next couple of years. Breakside will offer technical services as food industry mentors for both students and businesses, and the Market Hall funds will be allocated to provide business support for marketing, events, and small business stabilization grants. Next slide. Thank you for letting me present on Goal 1. I'll now turn this over to Heather, Director of Human Resources, to present on Goal 2.
Thank you, Daphne, and thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to talk about Goal 2. As we continue to grow and evolve as an organization, we're committed to fostering an equitable, inclusive, and welcoming workplace for all of our employees in this organization. And over the last 5 years, we've implemented a range of strategies and made progressive changes to ensure that the Port remains a place where everyone feels valued, empowered, and respected. And these include enhancing employee-centered programs, eliminating recruitment advancement barriers, and building our employees' diversity, equity, and inclusion and competency. And I'll highlight a few of those changes for you today. So starting with career fairs, next slide. Career fairs play a crucial role in our efforts to attract and recruit diverse candidates and promote inclusivity by welcoming candidates with different backgrounds, demographics, and experiences. We find that career fairs increase our access to a diverse talent pool, promote inclusivity, showcase the port and our inclusive company culture, and demonstrate our commitment to community engagement. Our goal is to participate up to 12 career fairs annually, and we invite port employees from across the organization to attend these fairs with us. And what you see on the slide are some of our outreach efforts in the past. Next slide. So when it comes to recruitment, this is a huge opportunity for us to look at the process and tools that we have. And these enhancements provide an opportunity for us to apply our equity lens. A few of some of the examples that we've done from a recruitment perspective that enhances our process and tools include creating a more inclusive and welcoming interview experience. So with that, we actually put together an interview panels across the port that include employees from different levels, different demographics, including gender and race, as well as departments in the organization. Another example of a recruitment enhancement effort is the use of a gender coding tool that allows us to apply a gender neutral language in how we put together job announcements. And lastly, to increase diversity of the applicant pool, we partner with organizations, job boards, and career fairs that focus on diverse candidates. As shown on this slide, we have made gains in the diversity of the applicant pool. While there was a substantial decrease that you can see here in fiscal year 21, the applicant counts for the same group has rebounded to pre-pandemic levels. And in the last 5 years, in the second slide that you can see here, we had a 5.3 percentage point increase. Next slide. Promotions. So the advancement of women and people of color is an important component of our shared prosperity goal. The promotion trend is strong for women, as you can see here. We reach our goal annually in the last 4 years, but we've had mixed results for people of color. While we've seen gains in the people of color employee population, we have only reached the promotion goal twice in the last 4 years. We're continuing in our efforts to develop specific strategies to support employees to be eligible for promotion and create opportunities for advancement for all employees in the organization. Next slide. Employee engagement. So the Pulse survey is our employee engagement survey tool. We launched it in 2019. It includes benchmark questions as well as DEI questions. And we center our DEI questions on understanding and inclusion. Both of those questions are listed here. Through listening to employee feedback, we learned the questions were difficult to answer and sometimes unclear. We saw an expected drop in both ratings during the pandemic. And in our assessment, we attribute that the drop in ratings resulted from significant employee turnover, also the onboarding of 40% of new employees across a 3-year time period, the new Shared Prosperity Office being launched, and a restructure of the DEI training program. So we're continuing to work with staff to gather feedback, and resulting from that feedback, we've made some changes to our DEI questions. We're actually currently in the midst of our Pulse survey right now. It expires next Wednesday, so employees have this opportunity to provide the feedback, and we're hopeful that we will see a greater response from employees, and as well as great feedback on the questions that we've made changes to. Next slide. So when it comes to DEI training, one of the opportunities that we present to employees annually is our Diversity Summit. This happens in the month of April. It's a full month of training opportunities. We bring internal and external presenters to these workshops. And last April, so this past April, we had approximately 33% employees participate in the training with a total of 910 training hours logged. We will continue as an organization to facilitate employee engagement and participation when it comes to enriching DEI experiences and learning at the port. Our DEI team is looking for ways to reach out not only at the headquarters, but also at the various different locations and sites that we have, and I know across the different shifts as well, since some of our essential workers are 24/7 operations. Next slide. So one of the 5 outcomes in the Port's strategic plan is to ensure that employees feel safe, welcomed, and included. We created a robust employee engagement process to allow employees to provide feedback on the question of what makes you feel safe, welcome, and included. So by the numbers, we hosted 5 sessions across a variety of different locations at different times, shift schedules, sites, and through different media. We had more than 450 employees participate in these conversations, and we logged more than 6,000 individual comments. As a result of the engagement and feedback, we actually selected performance measures that reflect staff input and priorities in the organization. Next slide. And I conclude with this, last but not least, our wellness program. It is holistic, covering all pillars of health from social, physical, and mental to financial and spiritual and environmental. And we offer these opportunities through on-site, virtual, and on-the-go opportunities. As a result, the Port has been named Oregon's healthiest employer 5 years in a row from 2019 to 2023, and we're the only employer across all categories to 5-peat. So we're really, really proud of this recognition result. By the numbers, from a wellness perspective, we have 501 employees registered in Sprout, which is our wellness platform. 90% of these employees are actively engaged, which means that they're logging one activity or another throughout the day, throughout the week. 50% of our employees have earned their wellness incentive for calendar year 2024. This means they will see a reduction in their monthly premium, and for some, they will also receive additional health savings account contributions. Some of the new benefits that we've added, just to give you an idea, our on-site physical therapy program, infertility benefits, weight loss medication, and new family benefits focus on providing backup childcare, emergency childcare, tutoring, elder care, and pet care starting in 2024. So what's next? We're looking to offer on-site mental health like we have done with the on-site physical therapy program, and we're also exploring the opportunity to have an on-site mental health resource room. So thank you for your time. I now pass the baton on to my colleague, Elizabeth Kennedy Wong, who is our Community and Tribal Engagement Manager.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. And I'm really happy to share with you the results of the last several years of equitable engagement. And one thing I want to share with you as you listen to this is that this work is happening throughout the organization. And there's examples of all the different divisions and the work that they're doing. So several years ago, we created a shared definition of community engagement at the Port. Equitable engagement promotes fairness, inclusivity, and respect for diverse perspectives. It's dynamic and an ongoing process that reflects a commitment to humility and a willingness to learn from and with our communities. Next slide. Next, thanks. So just last year, we adopted 2 tools that are key to creating a program that can be measured and evaluated. And here are some highlights from that work. Next slide. More than a year ago, the corporate communications team identified the goal to connect with Spanish language speakers. As a result of that work, we're producing more representative imagery in our materials, and we're engaging in more transcreation as opposed to translation. It's a really interesting nuance and change to how we approach the work of communications. Our contracts with minority, women-owned, and emerging small businesses help us better represent the communities we serve in communications. And these contracts help our teams effectively navigate the complexities of perspectives and understand different identities and foster an environment where individuals from all backgrounds feel represented, valued, and respected. I think you really see the results of some of this work in the new brand that was launched recently. Next slide. The Northwest Accelerator Spring event introduced the Accelerator program to the broader Portland community. Our team assisted the Northwest Accelerator with its Department of Energy Inclusive Innovation application and was awarded $500,000 to continue building out its network of partners in the Pacific Northwest. The East County Outreach team connected with more than 750 individuals participating in 8 events and 32 meetings to build our understanding of community needs in East County. And as you know from the presentation last month, on the port's economic impact, our port economist has invested significant time in researching and presenting on systemic inequities in the airport industry, and that work also informs our efforts in the region. Next slide. So the airport operations has a really robust engagement program, and there's multiple different facets of it. One is the PDX Arts Program. It represents artists of diverse races, genders, geographic origins, ethnicities, and ways of being with the purpose of advancing fair and equitable inclusion. Just last year, $1.85 million was awarded to businesses owned by artists of color, really demonstrating that the arts program is also a significant economic art opportunity for artists. The PDX Access and Accessibility Advisory Committee consists of volunteers who support and attend to delivering quality experiences for users who are living with disabilities. There's 2 really robust examples. One, Sky's the Limit. More than 750 individuals, people living with disabilities, their caregivers, and their families participated in exercises that gave them access to some of the most anxiety-producing aspects of travel. Airlines, staff, TSA participated in the event, really helping people bridge the gap between accessing the airport and feeling comfortable doing so. The PDX People Program is another committee. It's 10 individuals who represent the 10,000 non-port employees who really are taking care of setting the cultural tone at the airport and ensuring that employees and travelers' experiences represent the diversity of interests within the PDX community. This year, they've identified 10 culturally specific events that they want to support. So you'll be seeing activities for November, Native American Heritage Month, the winter holidays in December, and also Lunar New Year in January. Next slide, please. The environmental program in Lower Willamette also provide really robust opportunities for engaging with community. The Columbia Slough Watershed Council's annual event is an excellent example of how our partnerships really connect us with the community. This event brings together environmental education, workforce training, and the history of Vanport. And as an attendant benefit, we also planted 1,400 native shrubs in a wetland that we own. The environmental program also has a robust engagement plan that's focused on the elimination of diesel emissions from ground support equipment at PDX. This plan earned us $16 million from the Federal Aviation Administration Airport Improvement Program grant for the installation of charging infrastructure at PDX. And then the Lower Willamette program for the last 2 years has hosted an event we've called Environmental Field Day, where we've invited the community to come in and learn about the cleanup work that's being proposed and will be happening at Willamette Cove. Last year, almost 100 community members participated. This year, we had 50 community members participate, 8 community-based organizations, several state, local, and federal partners, and 3 tribes participated in the event. And everybody who participated reflected having a better understanding of how we were approaching doing that work. Next slide. So the Port's Emerging Tribal Relations Program is really focused on understanding the history of tribes and their unique experience with government. It's this history and this experience that's really required us to approach developing tribal relations with a long-term focus on relationship building. Past experiences have taught tribes to engage cautiously and focusing on those entities who have demonstrated a commitment to the long term. So far through our tribal relations work, we've done a couple of really important things. First, we were developing relationships with the Portland State University School of Indigenous Studies and Wisdom of the Elders to understand and discuss opportunities to partner with them and bring in ITEC, which is Indigenous Traditional, Ecological, and Cultural Knowledge, into our work. We're providing free storage to 2 canoe families who are storing 30-foot boats. That is no small thing to offer the community. We have invited the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians Economic Development Corporation to come and give trainings to staff on economic development priorities for tribes in the region. We've also attended the ATNI Economic Development Summit in Pendleton. We participated in the Yakima Lamprey Celebration and the Westmoreland Salmon Celebration. We've had staff attend the screenings of Covenant of the Salmon People, which is a documentary that was put on by the Nez Perce, participated in by the chair of the Nez Perce tribe. We've participated in the Grand Run Cultural Summit, the ATNI Winter Conference, and Economic Development Summits. And staff and our consultant have provided trainings on tribal sovereignty and culture and governance to more than 150 port staff. Next slide. And finally, I want to share with you our sponsorship program. So last year we sponsored 36 events and activities. This year we're on track to sponsor more than 50 community events and activities in community-based organizations. We're contributing $150,000 in these efforts. Currently, in alignment with our shared prosperity goals, 70% of those sponsorships are going to BIPOC and youth supporting organizations. Additionally, in addition to just the Shared Prosperity Division sponsorship program, divisions across the organization have contributed $180,000 to community-based organizations and business groups. And those are done in specific strategic partnership to supporting economic development, trade, and supporting workforce safety. That's a total investment of more than $300,000 into community-based organizations and partnerships. And since 2018, the Port has invested a tremendous overall amount of $1,366,462 into community-based organizations and support. So as you can see, the investment in the community is really making a difference in all aspects of the organization, from how we communicate to what we're investing in. And this is the work that will really help us get to shared prosperity. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. It looks like Myra is coming. I would ask everybody to stay close because you may have questions.
Thank you, everybody, for staying with us in the presentation. I'm here just to conclude that moving forward, you might see some differences in how we're providing reports and progress reports on this work as for the Port. And the three main priorities we have is to continue to increase capacity for staff. As you see, there's an incredible baseline of understanding and willingness and intentionality on this work. So we want to make sure that we continue that momentum and we look at how do we maximize those outcomes. The second priority for us is to continue to integrate these strategies throughout the Port at different levels of the organizations through different structures that we're putting together. And then the last one is to grow our ability to measure our progress. So on that in particular, we are integrating the global DEI benchmarks into the work, where right now we're conducting a baseline assessment that's going to help us understand where we are and how we can track our progress moving forward. So you'll be hearing more from us in the near future about how that work is looking. And so right now, also before we go into questions, I also want to acknowledge in particular our DEI director, Martin Koblenz, and Barbara Alexander, our Shared Prosperity Analyst, that were critical partners in making sure we have the report we have in front of you today, and the cross-functional team of staff that is a really big group of staff that participated in making this happen. So thank you, and then we're open for questions or comments.
First, thank you so much. I mean, it's 5 years and it has felt like a big lift from this side of the table, but we know that it, there was a foundation of work happening at the Port much before this. I really appreciate the focus and the ability to give us a report like this. As people say, you care about what you measure and you measure what you care about, and this shows that for sure. So thank you so much. I'm sure we have lots of questions. I saw lots of people. Go ahead, Commissioner Devon.
Thank you for this super comprehensive report. And maybe I should address the questions to the folks who presented. So my first one is, I have two questions, if that's okay. For Daphne about small business, you mentioned that we met federal goals on one particular metric, but not local goals. I was just curious if you could give me some, what are the characteristics that make it difficult meeting the local goals and easier making the federal goals?
Well, on the federal side, I'd like to let you know that one of the reasons why we made our goals is because we had a couple of prime contractors on some of our projects that ended up being certified. So by having those prime contractors certified, we were able to gain more participation for those projects. And that's a huge reason why we were actually higher on our 11% goal and not just meeting that goal. For the larger projects, for small business, including T-Corps, we had a lot of issues during the pandemic that I mentioned. We have unfortunately had many small businesses go out of business. In particular, there's been a couple where we've had to rebid items specifically on T-Corps because subcontractors have gone out of business. So that has, had to shift our thought process in what we're bidding and how we're bidding it. So there's some of those reasons. The pandemic has definitely kind of changed the lay of the land when it comes to small businesses and participation. Yes.
And my second question is for Heather. You mentioned that one of the goals that you didn't succeed in was promotions for people of color, I believe. And you mentioned something about specific strategies that you're undertaking. Could you give us a sense for two things? One, were there any commonalities about why people of color didn't reach those benchmarks? And then secondly, an example of a specific strategy that you're pursuing to help that along.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, so the sample size is not significant enough for us to really be able to categorize into specific themes. So we didn't see any trends or specific themes that we could really work through. We also saw during the last 3-year period, the turnover of people of color is higher than prior to the pandemic. So that might have some influence with that. In terms of the strategies, one of the things that we have not had in place for the last 10 years is a development program for staff. And so this year, in mid-year 2024, we will be launching a port-wide employee development program. And it will be focused on employees across the organization at different levels.
Commissioner Alexander, please.
Yes, let me also offer my thanks. This is very, very impressive. Part of what is sort of so positive for me is that many of these initiatives have been in place for some time. And what has happened is that the strategic focus on shared prosperity has been a catalyst in some of them. So I would offer that as just stay on path, understand that this is very important work. And even some of the takeaways, I noticed one of the responses was that in responding to the survey, staff were unclear as to what they were being asked. That's a reflection of being in a learning environment. At the end of the day, diversity, equity, inclusion. Diversity, people understand. Equity, not so much. Inclusion, not at all. My experience has been that's the growth opportunity. So I would say don't let that takeaway be discouraging. It just allows you to formulate the strategies and the approaches that allowed shared prosperity to now go beyond the building. The ability to affect jobs, job development, transfer of generational wealth, all of those are downstream from this work. So I'm very, very encouraged that it feels like a struggle because it ought to. Okay.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for this. This is very important work, and I just wanted to say that, not only continue to provide us the data, but also while we focus on the goal, the small business goal, I think that it's equally important to continue to learn the stories of those companies that have come along that we have helped. I think that's very important for our community. But also, I like the fact that our team come out to the community, not wait for them to come and find us. So that's a huge effort. We start to communicate in their language, right? So I really, really appreciate for that initiative. And I like to see, I know 12 career fair a year is a lot on the team, but that's something that we can look back and say we did everything we can. So please continue to do that. I like the fact that we are together creating a sense of belonging. This is a family. This is a port family. And I think that if we continue to do that, we will continue to promote a very diverse, creative thinking center for our airport. And for that, I'm very proud of your work and really appreciate of your work. So thank you to all of you and to each of you.
I too echo everyone's thanks. It's a lot of hard work, and so keep it up. Couple of comments, maybe areas where you can add to it. Daphne, you in your presentation, you talked about a couple of barriers or things that your team is doing to help expand small business and women and minority-owned businesses accessing port contracts. And I'm thinking of the hard hat example, number one, and not necessarily a barrier, but the mentor protege program to kind of reach out and grab potential businesses and get them engaged. To me, identifying those barriers that are keeping small business, women, minority-owned businesses from being successful is really, really important. The port can't necessarily go out and say, here, create a new business, but anything that we can do to remove barriers and encourage that participation, I think is really important. I know we did it with our concession program and had a great conversation at the last meeting about the big concessionaire outside of security, so pre-security, and some things the port are doing to try to encourage that, although I think it made us a little bit uncomfortable, but that's good. It's good for us too. So I don't know if you have any other comments about that, identifying barriers, but I just think everything that we can do in terms of outreach and helping those businesses access the port and being successful is going to be really important moving forward.
So just to comment, our team does a great job in going out there and going to our community partners, outreaching to women, people of color, to make sure that, if they see any barriers or if they have any issues trying to get contracts to the port, to let us know, to see how we can advocate for them and how we can break those barriers down as you're mentioning.
Thank you. Keep it up. Then my second point, Heather, was just around the whole HR world. And when I left state government, just the challenge of getting employees. Give me, a year later, are the workforce challenges still the same in terms of getting employees? And I'm guessing some of the challenge we faced in promoting people of color is when people of color come to the port and do great work, other people are poaching them. Other companies are poaching them. But I've been out of the workforce for a year, so just kind of give me a lay of the land of what's going on.
Yeah, I'll speak from two perspectives, from an attraction and retention perspective. So from an attraction perspective, the port is not unusual like any other company. During the pandemic, we lost staff, but we also gained really quality talent applicant pools. And we may not see the volume of, say, 100 applications per job, but what we did see was the quality of applicants actually increase. And so we're able to still hire and retain really quality candidates. That said, on the flip side with retention, we're still challenged with that. Our numbers are trending down. During the pandemic, at the height of it, our retention rate was or turnover rate was about 14%. We're down to about 10.9% right now, and that's good. We still have work to do just because of the fact that, to your point, there are companies out there that are poaching talented staff that we have, and we have staff that are looking for work-life balance. So what that means is maybe the opportunity for them is to work in an environment that is maybe different, offers them flexibility in schedules. That's some of the theme that we're hearing through our exit surveys, is the work-life balance piece that's pulling some of the staff away.
I just like to add in that questions from my line of work. I think that's also to promote a certain group of employee for the promotions. I think that intentional investment in training to make sure those employees ready for the job when the positions come available, it's equally important. So I would advise to look into how can we support you to set aside those to make those investment, so then the promotion, we can see a pipeline ready for the next promotions.
Sorry, thank you. So Heather, thank you for your answer. We continue to hear the debate around flexible scheduling and seeing the headlines about some major corporations moving towards more requiring employees to be in the office a certain number of days of the week. And I think that I can only imagine the challenges. So where is the port really around kind of that hybrid flexible work arrangement, and how's it working for us?
Why don't I take it, and rather than put Heather on the spot? We're 850 people, and roughly 500 show up 5 days a week on site because they have jobs that require on site. They are mostly represented employees. Here at headquarters, 350 or so. We've gone to 2 days a week. We've started earlier this year. 2 days a week must be Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and that's a minimum. So you must be in the office 2 days a week. And it has helped us a lot in terms of rebuilding that sort of sense of community and togetherness. Many groups still show up 3 or 4 or 5 days a week, and that's a team-based approach. I would say we are definitely seeing our peer group, our partners at Daimler or Nike, or moving to 3 and 4 days a week. I suspect 3 days a week is in our future. We're just sort of thinking through what the next year looks like. We're trying to maintain the flexibility that people come to the port for, and that they enjoy. So, we're in sort of ongoing dialogue about that. Nothing's happening this year. I would say in the course of calendar 24, we'll be talking again about what works. We tried to do a flexible approach, a team-based approach, and it didn't really work for us. And I think we're starting to have a lot more dialogue in the business community, at least, and in the public community as well, about what approaches work. And I think one thing our employees really appreciated is some clarity. So right now, what I've been telling our employees is, the 350 admin employees primarily, is we'll keep talking about it. We're not rushing into anything. We'll give people lots of notice when that comes. But we are seeing that the shift in our business partners are getting to 3, in some cases 4 days a week. I don't think we'll ever get to 4 days a week. I think that world has changed. And, the balance is what we're trying to strike, is how do you get the benefits of being together, and also the benefits of being able to do some work at home and be independent, and flexibility for family and church and whatever else it's been honestly, I'll look at Heather here, who's our resident professional. It's been an interesting HR journey too. And, some of our employees moved during the pandemic and thought that maybe they'd be able to work remote. And we've said, you can't do that. So we've lost some people, which is tough, but we're adjusting, trying to adjust while being transparent and signaling as well very clearly about what's ahead.
Thank you. Lots of rich discussion. Obviously, interesting work, and we really commend you for it. And thank you for bringing the report to us. Thanks so much. Okay, our first action item is the Executive Director's objectives for fiscal year 2023 and 2024. They are in front of you, and as you will see, they align to the strategic plan. The intention was to look forward into things that we know are opportunities or challenges for the port as it sits in this moment, and to ask Curtis and therefore the staff to really focus on them. So I'll open the forum for discussion. If anyone has questions about the objectives or feels like we need to revise or amend them in any way. They are, I'm not sure what the page number is. I think it's page 4 of your packet.
They are on slides.
They are not.
They are.
Next slide, please. So here's the first, which relates to, obviously, to PDX, and largely relates to both the big project, which I know all of us are really focused on and have been for a while, and our need to get it right for our community. So I'll pause on that one if anyone has questions. Okay, next slide, please. This relates largely to our marine business. And again, we know we have some opportunities and challenges there, particularly as relates to Terminal 6. Okay, next slide. Again, these set of objectives looks forward, both with respect to our shared prosperity initiatives and our desire to continue along that path, thinking about the general fund and the challenges presented there as they have been historically. And I think Curtis has done a good job of focusing on them in his time as executive director, as well as our work at T2, which is, I think, exciting work and will require a lot of leadership from the port to continue to move forward. And next slide. And of course, focusing on people and making sure that our culture is equitable and inclusive and continues to bring the best talent to the port. So these are the performance objectives. And again, I welcome any comments, questions. Please go ahead, Commissioner Luther.
The only thing that I don't see here is sponsorship of the long range plan and the advancement of that, given the high stakes community engagement and the ability to sort of see that show up in the shared prosperity. So I'm sure it's embedded in a lot of these objectives. So I was just curious how you're thinking about that.
Madam President, Commissioner, are you speaking to the airport master planning process? Yeah, certainly we think that's baked into the PDX conversation, but noted. I don't know there's a ton of stuff that's going on that is not in the annual objectives, but I would say I hear you and we'll certainly follow up. And I would say you probably don't need to see it here to know that we're fully committed to it and all in, but I hear you 100%. I'm looking over at Aviation Director Pippinger on that too, that will definitely be talking to you this year about it, but thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so I will then call for a motion and second to approve these objectives for the executive director. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. And now I'll call on Dan Pippinger.
Good morning still, commissioners. This item is to request approval to enter a concessions lease with Kavu Experiences for a common use lounge. Common use lounge at PDX will allow anybody, if they want the lounge experience, to go and have that. And we intend to locate it out on Concourse D. Here to present it is Michelle Campbell, PDX Concession Development Manager.
Thank you, Dan. Before I begin, I just wanted to say good morning, and Madam President and Commissioners, thank you for your time today. Before I begin, I did want to acknowledge a couple of guests that we had in the audience. We're now down to one, but Nicole Javel, who is head of delivery for Kavu, has joined us today. Kevin Schreier, who was president of the Americas for Kavu, was here, but unfortunately he had to leave. His flight was on time. So
we like that. Exactly. It's a good reason.
Next slide, please. So currently at PDX, we have 3 airline lounges. We have the Alaska Lounge, we have the Delta Sky Club, and we have the United Club. Common use lounges are a little bit different than that in that they're essentially a shared lounge where guests do not need to be ticketed on any specific airline to access the space. Typically, there are multiple ways that you can access the space. Operators contract with airlines, they contract with memberships, companies, they contract with different airline credit card companies, and some also offer day passes. All of these options lead to an effective use of space. They offer a lounge experience for all travelers and provide a revenue stream for the airport. Next slide, please. So the RFP was issued and it had multiple goals. We were looking for a qualified and experienced operator to design, construct, and manage the lounge. It should enhance the airport experience and offer excellent value and convenience. Also, it was important that the lounge had high customer experience and focus and was a good fit for PDX. We were looking for a quality employer who was also willing to engage in our local community. And it was important to have flexibility in terms of access. We wanted to be sure that there was the ability to purchase a day pass for those who would like to. The evaluation criteria of the RFP followed along the same lines as other recent concession RFPs. Included the employer-employee relationship plan, shared prosperity. It was evaluated on those, and also the small business team set the ACDB goal at a minimum participation level of 15%. Differences in this RFP was that we bid revenue sharing. That included both a minimum annual guarantee and rent. And then we also bid an annual spend for in-airport advertising. Next slide, please. So the location of the lounge is on Concourse D. It's a 2-level space. There's about close to 2,500 square feet on the enplaning level. And then there's more than 8,200 square feet on the mezzanine level. It's a large space, but it will allow plenty of room for growth through the term of the agreement. And it's also important that this space is accessible from all concourses, so anybody who passes through security can access the space, which is key for Common Use Lounge. Next slide, please. So the outcome. We're excited that an Escape Lounge was chosen and was selected, and Kavu is the parent company of Escape Lounges. They've operated lounges in the US for 8 years and globally for 13 years. They have a relationship with American Express, Priority Pass, other memberships, and they partner with a multitude of airlines, including British Airways, who flies at PDX. They also offer day passes. If you purchase one online before travel, it's $40. If you walk up to the door, it's $45. And they'll have discounts for airport employees, military, and some other entities as well. Kavu believes their best lounges are as unique as their host airport. And they also believe that a positive, motivated, and well-managed team will deliver the best possible guest experience. Their RFP incorporated local materials and nods to Portland's heritage, and it reflected the essence of the Pacific Northwest. They have chosen Gideon Toll Management Services to be the operator of the lounge. Gideon Toll currently operates 4 lounges for Kavu, and they are a ACDBE 100% company who is certified in the state of Oregon. Gideon Toll will be responsible for daily operations, staffing, food and beverage procurement, and brand experience execution. Their estimated hiring for PDX is 61 full-time and 5 part-time employees. In all lounge locations, there is a quick commitment to support the local community, and they've already reached out and made some connections in our community and will continue to do so as they get settled in. They also look to create partnerships with small business and, whenever possible, featuring those products within the lounge. Next slide, please. So moving into the key business terms, the initial term is 12 years, and then we'll have a 3-year, up to a 3-year option, which is due to the cost of the build out and also gives some flexibility on the end of the term. Rent is at 31% of gross receipts. The forecasted revenue to the port for the first lease year is $2.87 million. The minimum annual guarantee will be $2.59 million for the first lease year. And the tenant will pay either rent or MAG, whichever is greater. And every lease year will be adjusted for 85% of the prior lease year. Estimated build-out costs are $1,000 a square feet, and they will be 100% on the tenant. We'll also have a midterm refurbishment during the term of the agreement as well. And then the agreement includes the rest of the additional fees that we include in typical concessions agreements, along with a minimum annual spend for in-airport advertising of $15,000. Next slide, please. So the schedule, the RFP was issued in June of this year. It closed in July, and the selection was made in August. Here today, requesting approval to enter into a lease agreement. If approved, the execution will take place this month as well. And then design will also begin this month and continue through permitting and construction in November of next year. We are hopeful that the lounge will be open for 2024 Thanksgiving holidays. Next slide, please. And finally, requesting approval to enter into the concession lease agreement as recommended. Thank you.
Thank you for the work and the presentation. Commissioner Luther.
Thank you. Just a curious question about operating hours and how in these are there minimum operating hour expectations, and as it relates to the schedules for the planes, how are those expectations set out with the lounge operator?
We do have minimum concession operating hours that are included in the lease, and then those will also adjust based on delayed flights, and so they're required to be open 365 days. I believe it's 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. and then those will adjust as needed.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a motion.
I do.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
Commissioner Lamb. Sorry.
Thank you so much for the work. And I just have a few questions. So I'm seeing the ACDB goal established was 15%, and the small local business partners operating 4 lounges for other lounges. Do you know where are those other 4 lounges? In the Small Business Participation Gideon Toll Management Services LLC.
So what lounges do Gideon Toll operate for Kavu? Palm Beach, Nicole might have to correct me. Palm Beach, Syracuse, Columbus, and Fort Lauderdale. There, I had 2 of 4.
So I mean, I hope that they're gonna hire a team that locally, because that will help to hire the really minority BIPOC community for the workforce, and also buying locally, because when they say it's, whenever possible with local purchases, that I hope that, they will consider using local vendors to help our community. And also I'd like to ask, based on the 3-year options in the term, and it's saying based on the overall built-out cost, is there an agreement in how much they spend, and if they exceed that, we're going to grant that, or how does that work? Can you?
No, the option terms are at the beginning of the lease. The way it's set up right now is a 1-year option, and then it will roll to a second and to a third if both parties agree.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I did want to comment on the local vendors. They have reached out to some local vendors in Portland to partner with them in regards to the menu. That's one of the philosophies of Kavu, is to have a menu and that reflects the surrounding area. So we're excited about that piece as well.
Okay, good. The last question I have is what I'm seeing on here is the 15,000 in the airport advertising. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. This would be something new that we haven't done before. We do have our marketing program, as you know. This is above and beyond that, and the lounge is a little bit different, and so it will be 15,000. The advertising will be contracted through our advertising vendor. So they'll work with our advertising vendor, Lamar, currently, to do digital ads, promotions in the airport to let folks know that the lounge is coming, and then ongoing promotions of where it's located, and hours and menus and things like that.
Okay, good. So it's not through our contract. It's not through. We don't manage.
We will not. No, correct. Exactly. Great. Yeah, we won't be managing that piece of it.
Great.
It'll just the language in there just requires them to hit that minimum, and then what happens if they don't? But the contracting itself will be through Lamar or a future advertising agency.
Well, I'm excited for another option for our passengers. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Alexander.
Michael. Okay. Thank you very much. And I noticed that you've identified that Alaska, Delta, and United currently have their own. I'd be curious as to whether there's been experience with other carriers and other locations that would allow you to say we have a high degree of confidence that they will want to be a part of this. And then if that's clear. And then secondly, whether Alaska, Delta, or United clients would have access to both spaces, or whether this is separate and apart from their sort of singularly identified space.
For the first question, if I believe I understand that you were wondering if airlines have talked about having access to the lounge. Okay, so British Airways is a partner of Kavu, so I would imagine that they will most likely contract with Kavu for their passengers to access the lounge. All passengers will be able to access the lounge, whether they're flying on Alaska or Southwest, United. Does that answer your question?
So carriers don't have to be recruited in order to have their passengers take advantage of that. This is a uniform offering on behalf of PDX.
Correct.
Great. Thank
you.
And then the second one was, is this, if I'm traveling through Delta or United or American, I have the option of going to this space, which is universally available, in addition to if I wanted to try their sticky buns or something.
Absolutely. And there'll be a variety of ways. Kavu, as I mentioned, they have contracts with membership companies and credit card companies. So there are going to be a variety of ways that people could get in complimentary through a credit card they have, or I would say maybe a membership, I think. And then, but there's always the ability for a passenger to buy a daily pass. So if they don't have another way to get in that allows them, they can buy that daily pass.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Yeah, I was going to raise this question, but it's interesting. We've been talking about the patterns of traffic at the airport, and here, I call it a barbell, right? 5 a.m. and all the red-eye flights we have. But I thought I heard you mention that the timing of the was 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. and we have a significant number of flights that take off after. I assume some sort of adjustment will be made for that to be able to capture that potential traffic. So
Correct. That's
what was going
the
on.
Standard concessions required operating hours are 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. But as with any operator, we can adjust those hours as needed to reflect the traffic and ensure that they're available for those passengers who would like to use the space. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the recommendation? Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our final agenda item will be introduced by Keith Levitt.
Good morning. I see we're 4 minutes away here. We'll try to make this quick. I'm sure everyone's hungry, and I do think that PJ is going to start negotiating with our prior item there for Face Plant to be at the lounge. So we'll just give him a heads up about that right now. So out at Swan Island, some of you have been out there, but one thing you'll always notice when you drop into the island where Daimler is a McDonald's. And it's truly I think blight is the correct word for that facility. It has been in a bad state now for several years, made a lot worse during the pandemic. We have an opportunity here for really good economic development around innovation in the climate tech, food tech industry, and also to deal with some of the real serious safety issues and crime issues that we've had on Swan Island with this particular facility. So with me here is PJ Christopher to present this very interesting item.
Thank you, Keith. Good morning. My name is PJ Christopher, and I am pleased to present this opportunity to lease a port-owned asset to Face Plant. This land lease will be Face Plant's first branded restaurant, in addition to its global flagship and a vegan food and beverage research and development innovation center. It's from this Swan Island location that Face Plant will refine the blueprint of its menu, operations, and technology stack to achieve its ambitious goals of international growth. Before moving on, though, I would like to welcome founder and CEO Matt Plitch, who is here in attendance at today's meeting. Matt. Thank you, Matt, for attending. Next slide. So Face Plant is a startup, plant-based, quick serve restaurant drive-through concept. It has a three-member ownership team and has recently raised $4 million from 4 top venture capitalist firms in food, climate, and operations. And the money raised to date will be plugged back into the success of this flagship location on Swan Island. Face Plant will operate on a business model that meets customers on price, menu, and familiarity. And it would be an understatement, a complete understatement, to say that Face Plant is extremely motivated to lease the property to begin operations. I'm on the phone with Matt all the time about when we can get this thing going. So in July, Matt approached the Port of Portland with his interest in the lease of the site. Oh, sorry, next slide. Sorry. So here we go. So in July, Matt approached the port with his interest in leasing the site, shown here with the red star on the map. Matt's interest in the site and Face Plant's interest in the site, frankly, is due to the nearby neighborhood locations, the fact that the site has drive-through infrastructure, which is key to the success of the business, and thirdly, due to the fact that the site is within the city of Portland. And immediately upon engagement with Face Plant, they became active in the site, touring the site numerous times, and since then have negotiated and entered into a non-binding letter of intent with the port, and have also entered a due diligence permit and right of entry, and are very actively underway in due diligence of the site. As Keith said, the site was formerly leased to a McDonald's and is located at the entrance to Swan Island. It's really kind of a gateway site, frankly, and it's near the Daimler's headquarters building as well. The site is approximately 1 acre with an approximately 4,500 square foot restaurant building and complete with drive-through infrastructure, parking, and circulation. Unfortunately, as Keith had said, the site pretty soon after McDonald's vacancy experienced rampant vandalism, trespass, and a number of other nefarious activities to the site. Face Plant, however, will rebreathe life into this site. They're going to revitalize the site with an operational business, and they're also going to reinvest in the site well in excess of $500,000. In addition, they have aggressive goals to be operational within 5 to 6 months of signing this lease. In addition, Face Plant will participate in Port shared prosperity initiatives as well. Next slide. So using the same economic impact model that was used for the port's recent EIA, Face Plant's economic impacts are shown on the slide here. In addition, the shared prosperity initiative or the shared prosperity attributes are shown as well. Base Plant will also be a willing partner with the port to share data and explore how the transaction can support the community and create quality jobs. And lastly, upon success, Base Plant has really aggressive goals to grow within the region, bringing these additional jobs and supporting a priority industry for the region. Next slide, please. So the proposed business terms shown here are those terms that are negotiated and shown in the, or in further articulated in the lease with Base Plant. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I would like to reiterate my excitement for this lease with Base Plant at Swan Island. I'd like to thank you for your time. And I'd like to let you know that staff recommends approval of the executive director's recommendation shown here. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. It sounds like the facility as it currently exists may need help. Are we undertaking that, or?
The facility needs quite a bit of help, and Base Plant will be taking on the improvements of the site.
Thank you for that. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Commissioner
just,
Alexander.
along the same line, the takeover, I mean, there's been environmental studies? I mean, is there a sunken tank in there? I mean, what is it that that we're taking on? Do we understand the?
So Base Plant will be taking on improvements to the building, which are many. Electrical, all other pieces have been frankly gutted when McDonald's vacated. And then any other site improvements. When McDonald's left, there was an exit environmental audit. Base Plant will be doing an environmental site assessment using that exit audit and moving forward with site improvements.
Okay.
As needed.
Yeah, and I guess I'd just say we'll be surprised if there's any particular environmental issues like in the soil or anything like that. It's much more the building.
Right.
And the need for renovation in the building is very high. And when you go down there and it's boarded up, it was an attractant for a lot of criminal activity that went on down there. Yeah.
So, is there another property that's adjacent to this? What are our other properties, and how does that fit in?
So, as mentioned earlier, it is within close proximity to Daimler's headquarters building, just down the street, frankly. There is a vacant site along the river that the Port of Portland owns. We have an RC Display Vans, which is another small port lease on Swan Island. And there's a number of other non-port related uses in and around the facility.
I guess my question was, what other sites do we as the port own, and how does this play out as Swan Island changes and transforms?
Yeah, maybe I'll just pitch in here. What I love about Swan Island right now is it's this eclectic mix of industrial uses with high-end office campus with Daimler, and the focus is with both Daimler and Portland Community College, which also has a real presence, is on innovation. And so this particular use, while it's a bit of a food desert, it'll be great from a food standpoint. It's really great from an innovation standpoint. Probably our most marketable site is right across the street from this site, right along the river. And Daimler has a right of first opportunity on any use that we have for that site. But I think this only bolsters the innovation that's going to be happening in the future down at Swan Island.
Okay, thank you, Keith.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a motion and second to approve the recommendation.
So move.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries and the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.